this is Frenchie from Diamondback Armory. Following up from the previous DB10 disassembly video, it is now fully Cerakoted and ready for reassembly. Additional tools that you'll need from the last time is preferably some sort of tape, or even better, leather scraps, something to protect your pieces, to protect your finish from when you're hitting it with a punch or a hammer of sorts. So we Cerakoted this piece. The customer wanted something new and unique and something that he doesn't have in his arsenal and that he hasn't seen other people do with their rifles, while still getting the protection from a quality finish like Cerakote. So in the last video I disassembled this so that way we could get every piece completely stripped, clean, done, individual. That way we can spray it whatever color we need to and sandblast it. And now that that entire process is done, it is ready to be fully reassembled and sent back to the customer. This piece was a little more complicated than the ones I normally do. For this one I had to do 3 different colors on a few of the main pieces of the rifle. It started with the color I would use the least on the piece, in this case being the crushed silver. And then from there I had to put in a stencil of the areas I wanted to stay crushed silver, which I then sprayed tungsten over top of. And then after the first 2 layers were flashed, I then put the last round of stencil that I wanted to keep tungsten, and then sprayed the final color of midnight bronze over top. Okay, so we'll start with the lower receiver. I like to put the grip on first, along with all of its detents and springs. In this one, there are 2 different places where the springs and detents go. Not all AR lowers are the same. They tend to be very similar, however. It all depends on which brand you get, typically the brand more than anything. Pointing helps when you drop springs. Believe it or not, you'd be amazed at what you can find because you pointed. One difficulty I have with AR builds is a lot of the springs tend to look very, very similar. So when I actually go to reassemble these pieces, they all kind of look the same. I tend to go back to my previous builds. That usually helps. Otherwise, I take pictures. I take pictures of all of my pieces once I am done, or before Cerakoting, but after disassembly. Something to keep in mind: after you Cerakote, tolerances are tighter because Cerakote adds roughly 1 mil of thickness, and since I lightly sprayed on about 3 layers, it's going to be a little bit more than that. And now, something I am discovering, this is a good time to show you the order of operations here. In this case, you have the D10 here and then the D10 here. This is going to be a pain in the ass to try and put in the pin, this pin here now. So in this case, it would be better to actually remove these 2 and instead put the grip on later. Specifically, once you put in this pin and the other one, and the safety. Pin 1 goes here. You can tell because of the flat side there. And again, tolerances will be tighter. That is just the nature of Cerakote. So don't be afraid to really push in and dig in, because you might have to. You very well might have to. And this one will fit roughly here. There we go. And since the grip will go on later, we will start with the trigger assembly, which I always have trouble with. But that's besides the point. So I will start with, once I've figured out which pin goes where, I'll just keep them in place just to have less clutter in front of me. I will then go to the trigger assembly. So I will usually start by putting this spring back. One side of it is longer than the other, or wider than the other, and that is the one that will go down in this slot here. You'll see a little cutout and notch for it. So you just want to go in and push it down. Might be a bit stiff to get out. That's what we're looking for. And then this piece right here will sit right on top, fitting in that little square slot for it. And then you'll just push it down. And also this spring will go on the trigger like so. So it'll go in from underneath and then take one side up and over. Might be a little bit tricky. All depends on how tight the spring is. Over like that. Flip it to the other side. Try and hold it in place with one finger. And then slide it over. Okay, and we'll move on to a vise here. Here at Diamondback Armory, we have a saying that my boss yells at me every 5 seconds. And that is, don't use your hands as a vise. Now keep in mind not to crank too tightly, considering this is hollow. So we will take our trigger, drop it in here, like so. drop that in as well. There we go. And one thing I am learning with camos is I have coated them 2 different colors so as to try and match with the camo that I put on. And so this pin at the bottom I need to keep in mind is the tungsten color. And so I will go ahead and pop that in. I like to just simply push straight down and then with one thumb. And you can see, if you angle yourself correctly, you'll be able to see just enough so you can see what is going on. And then you can take a soft hammer. I try to use the rubber or plastic bit as much as humanly possible and just tap that in there. Right now it is having trouble because of the sear here not properly placed. There we go. That's the sound you're looking for. And there you are. Now if you look, the pin will be the same color as the piece of camo I put there. Now at this point, you can go ahead and put in your safety selector. Other thing to note, throughout this, you want to be oiling your firearm. The golden rule I was taught is wherever metal touches metal, that's where you want oil. I tend to go a little overboard. You don't have to do it the way I do. It is up to preference. But always, always, always oil your firearm. And we will go ahead and put the hammer in. This usually causes me a little bit of trouble. Might be the same for you, might not be. All depends. So I will start this pin. I won't put it all the way, however, just enough. There we go. Let's see if I can just push it. Nope. Okay. And I'll actually go in here and pull this out a little bit further. Now I can hit it better. There we go. Cool. Perfect. Now it is flush on both sides. Do a little trigger test. That passes. Beautiful. Once again, make sure to oil. So I'll put some oil right on the face of it here. And also right about here where it connects with the sear. There we go. And now we can go in here with our grip. To make my life easy, I will flip this upside down. Like so. That way you can use gravity as your best friend. This D10 will go down in here, pushed on like that. But that spring, there we go. There we go. Now we will grab our grip screw and the right size Allen key. In this case it is a 3/16 size. Drop it down in here. It did not go where it needed to, that's okay. That's better. We'll go ahead and screw that in. Right. Test the safety. That is what you want to see. All right, perfect. And now we will test this pin as well. Make sure that it has. Ooh, mistake number 1. I forgot the detent. As you can see, there's only a spring in there. Not a problem. We will go back and look for it. Hello. There you are. No biggie. Things happen sometimes. With ARs, there's lots of little parts and bits and pieces, and I get them all confused sometimes. That is why one thing I've been taught, and that I always follow, is take pictures when you're disassembling something. Because you never know what you'll end up forgetting, which in my case is which D10 goes where. Specifically, what I tend to have trouble with is what pin goes where. There are a lot of pins, and there are a lot of D10s and springs, and a lot of things to remember. So, I always take pictures that way. I can always be sure of what goes where. Go down here. You will go in there where you belong, and we'll try it again. I'll go ahead and let that fall out. Once again, the extra Cerakote thickness will take some finagling and wobbling, but there we go, now we got it. Drop this back in there. Perfect, just like that. Nice and tight. Safety works. This has tension on it now. Exactly what we are looking for. Alright, so now you have your trigger in. So I noticed I left out the detent because there was no spring tension on this. It flowed freely, while now I can't pull it out, even if I wanted to. It just slid right out. There was zero tension on it. So if that happens to you, keep that in mind. You probably forgot your detent. I like that look a lot. The pins matching whatever color I put there. I think it helps keep everything nice and even. Alright, so now we will move on to the bolt catch and mag release assembly. Once again, put it in the vise. We'll flip it around this way. So we'll go ahead and set your pieces here. Excuse me. We'll put tools away, grab your hammer and oil. So I'll go ahead and give this a couple drops, smear it around. This is specifically CLP. It's something I like to use since we have it in this little dropper here. Another oil I really like is Ballistol. It's what we use. It's what we sell here at the shop. You can do just about anything with it. I love this stuff. Shout out to Ballistol. So here I am currently lubing up the bolt catch, and now I'm going to add some to the 1/2 of the mag release, and this is the other half of said mag release. We'll start with the bolt catch here. This spring will go in this slot right here with this detent. I'll actually go ahead and put some oil on there too, since it is touching a metal part and is also made out of metal. After adding the spring and detent, it'll fit in this slot right here. And this part always messes me up. This is a common point of failure when it comes to reassembly and keeping the Cerakote protected. You have to hit this roll pin in here, but there's not a lot of room for you to mess with. So it's kind of a thing of do your best, do what you can. I'll get the roll pin here. Cool. Now let me find a roll pin punch. Grab your punches. And now, the part that's got me holding my breath, don't nick it. And this will take some fine motor skills. I am currently holding the punch at a sort of angle, and I am using my thumb to push on this, my ring finger to stabilize, and then my 2 fingers here to hold the punch in place. And it is something that is more common than you'd think I'd have to do. I do this all the time. That's a good sound. Right. Now your roll pin is in. This has spring tension. You are good. And, most importantly, the Cerakote was not nicked. Putting it back in this position. Alright, now to install the mag release. So you'll have your slot here for this side, which will go in like so. This spring goes on the other end, and you'll have to pivot around for this one. And then this end here with the grooves is what your thumb will be pushing on. So take the flat side and put it up against the workpiece. And what you'll have to do, and this may be a little tricky, all depends on how it goes, honestly. Let this piece poke out a little bit, and there will be spring tension. So once you push it in and get it in the slot, which I'm struggling with, there we go. You will take this end here, push it in, and you will spin it around. And that is how it actually gets screwed in. And I'm realizing another mistake of mine. Should have done this one second, because now this cannot pivot like it needs to. That's better. So in this case, I used a punch to push it in just a little bit further. That way it can properly catch. I think too much of it's sticking out. I don't like that. It's a little bit better. And that will do just fine. And to test it, I actually have the magazine right here. Okay, you see the bolt catch working as it should. This is stuck in there. And that's how you know you assembled it properly. That is good to go. From here, we will do what is arguably my least favorite part of the entire lower build, and that is getting this detent and spring in here, and then this pin right after. So you'll need to put spring and then detent first, which already has tension on it. But then you will also need to push down on it, keep it held, and then get this in here all at the same time. And it is not that fun of a process. In this case, it's simply because of spring tension and otherwise. This part is so much fun. So, you have your spring, goes in here, then your D10 goes in behind it. Now, the tricky part is there's a lot of tension here. Woohoo! And this is why. So, I will change approach and grab some sort of pliers. Here in shop we have hemostats. These will do just fine. So I will use the hemostats to hold on to the D10 for now. I'm gonna have to grab one of our better pairs. We'll find out. In like so. Then I'll actually switch hands here. Ooh, get out. There we go. Go ahead and insert. Then I will grab this here screwdriver. Slowly let go. Also pushing downward. There we go. This is under a lot of tension. It is very easy to lose. Don't feel bad if you lose it. Things happen. Oh, sweet baby Jesus. Nope, got it. And you see what I mean here. No biggie, we do it again. Things happen, things get lost. Thankfully, these are a dime a dozen, but it is never a fun feeling when you lose a piece. But that's okay, that's the nature of gunsmithing. Sometimes you'll lose bits and pieces. So now I have the screwdriver in between. There you go. This is good, because you see how it can move now. And here, we can let go. There we go. It is now in the trough it needs to be, and under tension, and we're good to go. And it won't come out. So, we are down to the last portion of the lower, where it is the entire buffer tube stock portion. Keeping it in the vise, we will grab everything and move over to here. Key things to note. You want these grooves facing this way, out towards your shoulder, not the gun, because that is what we will clamp onto when tightening it down. And as for this piece, you want this little raised piece facing towards the gun, because it'll fit in that certain slot. There we go, like so. Then go in, screw it in. Once you get to the D10, simply push down. This is about where you want it. We will tighten this down. We will grab our AR tool. Crank down. There you go. And here at Diamondback Armory, we always stake our nuts. Castle nuts, yes. So you can take something like this, some sort of center punch, something with a nice, sharp, pointy bit, and put it against one of these grooves here in order to squish the metal into it, and then you just hit it hard. Do one more good hit. There we go. That's nice and smushed in there. And that way, it increases the stability of your castle nut and decreases the chances of it just skating right off. Then all that's left is putting in your buffer, which you will probably most certainly have to push down on. Ooh, you're not in there well enough. Have to push down on that D10 a little bit. That is good and in place. And we can now put on the stock. That looks and feels good. And now your lower is fully assembled. So, now onto the upper assembly. We'll start by putting in the forward assist. Oop, left the oil. Tee. So, as always, like I like to do, I will go ahead and oil it up. Get it nice and lubed. There we go. Maybe a little. Can't hurt. Alright, so, nice and oiled up. This will go in its slot where it belongs. Not too tight, we like to see that. I'm just going to add some more around here, since it will be touching the metal at least a little bit. There we go. That in there. And then right in here goes a roll pin, which I will once again be using a vise for. Because And at this point, you might as well trademark it. Don't use your hands as a vise. Just to make my life easier, I'm going to grab this here set of hemostats. Just to get it started. So, don't use your hands as a device comes from my several war injuries from working, where I neglected to use a vise and got burned for it. I have a scar right here because I did precisely that. I used my hands as a vise and I paid the price. So now I try to tell people the same thing. Don't do what I did, children. All right, once again, the weird holding. Okay, and at this point, it's nice and captive. It won't slip out on you. So then you can just go to using the punch. Okay, I'll go in with a slightly smaller punch to drive it in the rest of the way. There we go. And ultimately, you want it a little bit recessed, that way it doesn't stick out at all. That is good, and how we like it. Perfect. Next, we will go to the dust cover. And this one I also tend to have trouble with. Just know the spring goes like so. The long end hits the actual, pushes against the dust cover, and the short end here will push up against the upper receiver. So what we will go ahead and do is hold it like so, and we'll get it started. Part of the way, push down like so, and we'll push this pin, if you will, part of the way, enough to get around the spring. Back it off a little bit, because we will be spinning this one. We'll be twisting this, that way there's pressure on it. I know my fingers are in the way, there's only so much I can do. So try to hold on to one end with your finger, and then with the other end, grabbing this and twisting it around to build up that tension, because you will need it. So I had it, lost it, no big deal, just gotta try it again. But you got it where you want it. Start pushing in your pin, keeping it in place where it needs to be, and then you can push it in the rest of the way, and you have tension, just like so. And you can test it, stays in, doesn't shake out, and once you push on it, it'll pop. It should pop right out. There we go. Perfect. All right, so next step in the upper assembly process is mounting the barrel, as well as everything that goes on the barrel, being gas tube, gas block, and your muzzle device of choice. And another thing to note is for the barrel nut, we use grease to mount that on. So we will bring it over here. I had the tool, where to go? There we are. This tool will work. This will make it to where it's a lot easier to grip. Crank that down. Cool. Grab the barrel. You don't have to use grease on the actual barrel itself. I simply prefer to. Preference thing for me. I like things being heavily oiled and or greased up. And there's pros and cons to that. Too much oil and or grease can make it to where your gun can get dirtier faster, because there's more for particulates to cling onto. So that is one thing to be aware of. But under oiling it, in my opinion, is much worse. And once again, because there are like solid 2 or 3 layers of Cerakote on here, it will be a little tight, and that is all right. You can simply wiggle and push your way in. I'll actually set this down like so. This is aeroshell grease. It's simply that is the barrel grease that we opt for. There we go. Perfect. Now your barrel is in place as it should be. Put it back on the tool. And from here, now having the rest of the parts, we will take more of the grease and put it on the threads here. This ensures you have a nice tight fit and hold in this case, because grease is perfectly adequate, it's all you'll really need to keep it on. It's not under necessarily any pressure. It's not at risk of falling off. With this, all you really need to do is grip it nice and tight. And because, once again, there is Cerakote, the tolerances are off, so this will be a lot tighter to screw on than it normally would be. And that's okay, because Cerakote is strong, but it will strip when it needs to. I have greasy hands. Okay, so at this point, now that we're reaching the end of the thread, it's getting a little more difficult to thread on, which is fine. We will switch to our AR tool and our tape. So in order to protect the Cerakote, we will go ahead and wrap this around in tape. That way, this adds just a little layer of protection, because Cerakote is strong, absolutely. However, metal scratching against ceramic can scratch it up. If that happens, it's okay. Mistakes happen. You can always go back over it later. This handy dandy wrench here. Go ahead and tighten this down. And I'll just finish it off my end. Okay. Perfect. Tape's starting to come off. So far it is mostly protected, which is good. That's what we were looking for. There we go. Now it is torqued down, Guten tight, as we say. And your barrel is mounted. From there, we can take our gas block, and for this one to fit, and this is common with a lot of Cerakote projects I've encountered, I had to go inside and sand it down. I used a 400 grit sandpaper. That way, it'll fit smoothly over top of the barrel. Otherwise, you run into an issue, which I've had a few times, where once you hit this area, it'll just stop. There's a little step that goes up, and just that little extra millimeter of thickness is enough in some cases to stop it altogether. So we'll go ahead and take our gas tube. Make sure to keep in mind where the holes are pointing. In this case, points perfectly down. And there may be, once again, differences in tolerance due to the additional Cerakote. There we go. Perfect. Yeah, I'm okay. Well, this is good because there's very little resistance. That means I did a good job. So we'll point this downward, making sure to stay, and there we go. So line up, a roll pin goes in here, line up those holes with the ones in the gas tube, and always make sure that this hole is pointing in the direction it needs to, which in this case it is. So we can go ahead and just slide this on there, line this up where it needs to be, and there will be two, and I'll actually flip this over so you can see. There will be two set screws on the underside of the gas block, and this is the case for most gas blocks that I've seen, and we will use that to hold it in place. And these set screws fit specifically a 3/32 bit, so I'll just go ahead and crank them on there. Here's one, there's two. Alright, now it is in place, it won't move back and forth. We'll go ahead and flip this back over to put in our roll pin, which I forgot over there. So we'll take our roll pin here, make sure one more time that the holes line up, go ahead and get it started, go ahead and knock that in. I'll grab a smaller punch, get seated the rest of the way. Perfect, and that is your gas block installed. And last thing for the barrel is the crush washer, which typically we don't bother Cerakoting them. They're going to be, as the name implies, crushed and pressed on there, and it's just gonna, the finish is gonna get ruined no matter what. So it's something we typically don't bother too much doing. And another thing to note, we rock set our muscle devices in place, because Rockset does not care about heat. Loctite will. So if you were to use Loctite, it will eventually break free. While with Rockset, you won't have that problem. This was just a test fitment. Go ahead and get our Rockset. Tap it on the screw. Good, couple drops. That'll do just fine. If anything, that's probably a little bit too much, but that's okay. And we'll go ahead and screw that on there. And much like with the barrel nut, we will take our trusty tape, wrap it around, grab our wrench here and crank down on that crush washer. It is a crush washer. It is meant to be crushed. That is its entire job. And we also need to make sure we have it timed properly, meaning the part of the muzzle device that doesn't have holes is pointing the correct way. I could go over a little bit more, so we will do just that. All right, double and triple checking. Over a little bit more. I feel like it's not moving much. Let's try this again. There we go. Now you are good and timed, and you do not have to worry about that. Rock said it'll take about 24 hours to fully cure, so give it time to cure before firing your rifle. And all that will be left is putting on your handguard, which will slide right over the entire affair, like so. Now we'll need the 3 screws. So in this case, after looking at these one more time, they are a really weird measurement for some reason. Our set has pretty standard sizes. This one is 9/64 for some reason. I assume that's probably the best size that they agreed on, but either way, once you have your 9/64 bit, there are 3 holes right here, which is exactly where they will go. So we'll go ahead and thread them one at a time here. Apologies for the awkward angle. That is how gunsmithing can be sometimes. Unfortunately, I wish it were easier. It is what it is. Ooh, my bad. So we got the middle one cranked. Moving on to the left one. Down. And that is your upper assembly done. Last but not least, you have your charging handle to reassemble. So I will go ahead and oil it up like so. I will need my punches. Keep track of your roll pin. You don't want to lose it. I have lost too many roll pins in this business. Right. So you will line up. What I'm working on right now is lining up these 2 holes together while also fighting this spring, which is always the most fun part of gunsmithing and AR reassemblies. Fighting springs. Oh, guns in general are very spring heavy. I will actually get this started. Oh, went a little too far there. That's okay. Trying to push it back out really quickly. There we go. So I have my roll pin started. I'll go in like this. And I'll actually flip my work over. That way I can see it through the other side. Okay. Something you can do as well is you can actually push it against, say, the table you're working on. Sometimes it'll work, sometimes it won't. In my case, I just put a hole in our table. And that's okay. There we go. Have it like that. Oh, that's annoying. I had it, then I lost it. I'm gonna get on something harder. Switch hands. There we go, that's better. Like the others, now I will grab a punch, finish driving it in the rest of the way. See how it looks. Drive it in a couple taps further, just for looks. There we go. Nice and flush on both sides. Now, your final step is to reassemble. So I will go ahead and lube up all of our major pieces, starting with the charging handle. Thin line of oil, and then cover. Or you can do a couple drops, whichever way you prefer. I'll put a drop on the claw itself as well. There we go. And we'll put it in about right there into its slot. And then we will take our bolt, oil that up as well. You can Cerakote bolts. It all depends on which series. What we go with is H series of Cerakote, which is where we get most of our colors from. H series tends to be very easy to work with in terms of creating colors, which is why we like it so much. But relative to the other series, E series, it is relatively thick. E series is about half the thickness of H series, and you can use it to coat things like bolts. In this case, the bolt here is uncerakoted. So we'll go ahead and knock that in there. Lovely. And we will pop out our 2 pins, like so. There's that pin in. you now have your fully reassembled DB10. We will do a quick functions check to make sure it all works, to see if it's clear, say it works. Trigger resets, fires again. Bolt cap works as intended, and you're now complete. So initial impressions, not to toot my own horn, but this looks great. I like the color scheme for sure. Definitely fits very well, the 3 colors. Overall, probably one of the easier ARs I've had to reassemble. There are some where things get more tricky, very tight corners. Oftentimes ARs will have springs and detents that sit along your castle nut and such, and so those tend to be very annoying to try and tighten on. But overall, this was a fun one to work with. It was easy to put together, easy to Cerakote, easy to take apart. Definitely nice, and I would love to do this sort of thing again on a different AR. And once again, this is Frenchie over at Diamondback Armory. Thank you for joining us.